From the Amore Cafe and Juice Bar in Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air, where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we call affectionately Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we're returning to our artist spotlight with painter, illustrator, Elissa Gore. Many Inwood residents know Elissa from her paintings depicted in Inwood in all its natural beauty, viewable on her blog and website, and from many plein-air sessions she has led in Inwood Hill Park, among other places. She's been painting professionally over 25 years, and her work hangs in many private homes and over 70 public collections. We're going to talk to her about that and so much more. But first, let me welcome you, Elissa, to Inwood Artworks On Air.
Hi, Aaron. Thrilled to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here with me on this gorgeous spring day, looking out on a unnaturally quiet Broadway during this time. We are, of course, experiencing an unprecedented and, moment here. It's the 7th week of quarantine in the face of the worldwide coronavirus pandemic. Non-essential businesses are closed, and we're all paused here in New York for a little bit, and many around the world and the country are as well, practicing social distancing, and it's been a strange new adjustment for us all. For the record, we are practicing social distancing here on the podcast today. We're disinfected and all that good stuff, so we're taking our precautions. But first thing, Elissa, how are you and yours doing?
You know, I have so many unfinished projects that I could live under quarantine for a year and still not get to the bottom of them. So I have a lot to keep me distracted from the crazy change in our lives right now. I'm thrilled to say that I've lived in Inwood for 35 years, that I raised my family here, as well as have been fortunate enough to have a place where I can also have a studio and work in my own home. I raised two fantastic daughters right on the corner of 215th Street and Indian Road, and my biggest frustration right now is that they've flown the coop. They're both educators. They've moved. One is in Florida and the other is in California, and I have darling granddaughters that I can't tickle right now, and I can't visit because of the pandemic, and it only makes it more desirable. You know, it's as if the thing that you can't have is always the thing that, makes it ever more elusive and attractive. Anyway, my older daughter is in Los Angeles, was very lucky to have a full-time tenure-track job at the University of Southern California, but she's gotten sick with maybe an intestinal version of COVID, maybe something else, but she's been very, very ill for more than 2 weeks now, and they've been talking about hospitalizing her if she doesn't improve in a certain period of time.
Oh, we send her our very best, and we hope that you can get out there to see her when the time is right. When, as you said once before to me earlier, who wants a older woman from New York City coming out to visit them and scaring the bejesus out of everybody? So you're doing your part by staying pat here and
staying at home.
And everyone's doing what they're doing to keep everybody else safe. So you can take small comfort in that, and hopefully technology has helped you stay in touch with them, and we'll send them our best wishes, of course.
I love FaceTime.
Well, that's all you can do, right?
Yeah.
That's how you remain sane. Well, a version of it, right?
But my sanity is Inwood Hill Park. And so I've been going out in March. I noticed that the weeping cherry tree that's next to the boathouse, that is a special tree in my heart, place in my heart of trees, and is for about half of the people in Inwood. I mean, people fight to get to sit underneath that bench, and I'm sure there's been many, many engagements, cemented there, and it's just very important. So I got to sit under there, and I brought out. I carry a little watercolor sketchbook with me, and I've painted, close to 20 little paintings of this tree. I mean, they're mainly parts of the tree, and as it flowers, and every day my feeling is just to sort of escape the general buzz of Armageddon in the atmosphere, and just look at something that I see as a real positive and hopeful image.
Why is that spot, amongst so many others in Inwood Hill Park, so important to you?
To me, or to that? Well, I think it's a beautiful view. It's the one place where the bench is within 6 or 8 feet of the shoreline, and it's not obstructed with a fence. And you can, they would put benches that with unobstructed, without a barrier, in more places. I think, the other place that's like that is down at the very end of the peninsula. People tend to congregate down there for the very same reason. So there's all those old cast iron fences that don't stop anybody from getting to the other side. And
I know, they're just a waste.
They're just a waste.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there. The other, but I was just thinking about how the city's talking about closing off streets next to parks, and I thought, oh great, number one, they're going to close off Indian Road because it's next to a park, right? And it's a low, there's not a lot of traffic there, and it would make it inconvenient for people to come and visit the park. So then let's close it, and then but then I looked across and I walked into the park yesterday, and here the cops were all over, and they had put barrier tape on every entrance to the ball field. So there was an open space, it has to be 5 acres, that grassy, people have been guilty of lying on blankets in there, away from others. What on earth could be the possible problem with that? Except that, if you don't want people to play baseball, put up a sign that says don't play baseball. And I haven't seen anything more egregious than a 9-year-old and his dad playing catch in there. So I don't mean to sound like a reactionary, but I wish that decisions about things like this were made by the community that lives there rather than by Bill de Blasio. My 2 cents.
Well, it's fairly safe to say right now that we're living in a world that hardly anyone could have anticipated a few months ago. And as someone who has spent decades observing and recording the world, as you have, what does all this look like to you now as an artist? I mean, obviously there's a lot of social problems that we can speak of that we're addressing, and we'll see how the MTA bounces back. We'll see how our parks are going to be used in the future. How can we socialize ourselves safely? So, as artists too, who are navigating these worlds, what does this look like to you? Since you use the neighborhood as a canvas. So,
I actually am guilty of trying to escape the neighborhood constantly for decades. Either to go downtown where everyone's, where the art world is, where, the right social connections, will help one's career. They're certainly not here in Inwood. or, or up, a lot of my work is are rural landscapes, wide open space things. And in the past 10 years or so, I've been a landscape painter for 35 years. So I've worked a lot where I would gather materials upstate during the summer and bring them back and develop paintings in my studio. Since the particular market that my dealer has once, or she felt once, images that don't have human structures in them. So that, if it had a bridge or a building or a house or a barn, or, it's definitely a turnoff for them. I've avoided doing them. And so in Inwood, at least my view of Inwood includes the largest architectural feature is this bridge that's a half a mile long.
Right.
That's, just smacks me in the head every time I walk out the door. So at one point about 10 years ago, when I started working outside with an easel, making paintings and studies that weren't just like sketches that were never seen, which is what a lot of my work before was. These are things that could be product, or it could be, sold, and I have sold some of them. I started, not in the wintertime. Couldn't travel. I got lazy. I don't want to spend so much time traveling, and I've got just all this beautiful nature outside. So I've started to work out in the park sometimes, and now I'm happy to paint in the park every single day. I could stay there all year round.
What's it about that bridge that really attracts you, other than its pure expansiveness? I mean, it is such an iconic landmark for our neighborhood, and everyone feels almost, I will say, even a sense of like a small town pride about it. It's a symbol for.
I don't think they felt pride about it when it was first built about 50 years ago.
Well, probably not.
There was a lot of grumbling. And
all around the city, right?
Not 50 years ago, more than that. Almost 100 years ago. One of the old women who lived in my building when I first moved in there 35 years ago was the wife of the first captain of the bridge. So God, what was her name? She's long gone. So I talked to her, Mrs. Collins, I think. At any rate, I talked to her a lot about how people felt about the bridge. They didn't like it very much in the beginning. And now, of course, it's a whole new, there are new generations of people.
But I think it mirrors our generation now about the rezoning in many ways, too. Because all of us who are here now weren't here when the bridge was built, but we're here now while people are trying to put up large buildings east of Broadway at 207 and the University Heights Bridge, and the whole city's changing. Of course, New York is nothing but constant construction change, obviously. And I feel like there's the same kind of resentment in our community by the locals to the rezoning for all the way gentrification is a word that people have negative reactionary impulses to. Perhaps people 40 years from now will go, wow, what a really nice building they built here in this XYZ style that's so picturesque. It's in all the photography magazines, and who knows, right? Who knows how it'll be taken in, regardless of what your personal opinions are about your neighborhood and how you know your neighborhood. Do you walk around and kind of see the neighborhood and how it's changing, and do you have opinions like the old bridge Mrs. Collins had about our neighborhood?
I would like it. I really what bothers me about the redevelopment or the rezoning and development is that it's developer-driven rather than urban planning-driven. That I don't think that it, if the design was more beautiful. What's nice about Inwood Hill Park is the design is beautiful. The arc of the bridge is echoed by the shape of the shoreline of the inlet there, and then there are the same curve as in part of the window features in the boathouse, or what it used to be, the boathouse.
Nature center there.
The nature center that isn't.
Right.
Which is another.
It's another story for another podcast.
We'll have another thing that infuriates me, but so I just wish that the decisions were made with a little more care.
Well, and like you said, and because reason why I asked that question fully, not just you're giving the response I would hopefully you would give, because you see the world, artists see the world in lines and shapes and contours, and seeing how there's a spatial relationship to be had with the rest of the world.
Listen, I have a degree from the Penn School of Design. This is, it's all one thing. Painting isn't different. It's, the rules of that govern architecture are not very different from the rules that govern painting. And as I'm sitting here, I'm looking at that unattractive building that Verizon put there in that spot, right across from us, the old telephone building.
5030 Broadway.
Correct. There's a monolith with very few architectural features that are.
And yet, right behind it, you have 3 ginormous smokestacks coming out of the.
That's pretty ugly too. I mean, Inwood's sort of been the
it's very
backyard of this area for a long time. It would just be nice if I do like the idea of the area north of 218th Street on the other side not being a parking lot. And because it seems like the space would be put to better use. But I just want them to make something, thoughtful.
Well, at the same time as this neighborhood suffers from lack of parking, so maybe they can do both of those things, create a place where more parking can be had, and yet also do it in an aesthetically pleasing way that actually hopefully contributes to the cultural landscape of the neighborhood and its history. Who knows?
Well, the neighborhood's lack of parking is very complicated. It isn't just because we need more parking. We need fewer commuters coming in. We notice there are many more parking spots now.
Well, we have a density we have a density problem, don't we?
No, it's with the people driving in from Westchester and parking on Seaman Avenue. If you get there, if you walk, having parked in the neighborhood for 35 years, it's all about timing. This gentleman over here is shaking his head, nodding furiously. If there was, it's
Gary.
connected to
That's Gary
public.
Hardcastle, our sound designer.
It's tied up with transit, and it's an urban planning problem. It's much larger than let's build some garages. Let's figure out a way to keep. I'm kind of in favor of having residential parking permits. That would be a nice way to start.
Well, for someone who people think artists are so solitary, if anyone's listened to you for the past few minutes, they can see how community-oriented you are and how far-reaching you are, and to try and find solutions and to be of an aid to your community, which I think is something always very interesting about you, because you've always strived to share your craft from novices to aspiring painters to established folks. You co-founded a Paint Inwood. I wanted to bring up.
Thank you for that. We have it's just an outdoor painting event that Sally Fisher and I started last June to try and, bring some awareness to to all aspects of this part of town. So although I'm more interested in the parks, certainly we attracted painters, we sent out it was an invitational. They were people that I knew. And, someone came up from as far away as Baltimore because she loves painting the urban landscape. We had people from way down, like in Red Hook and Brooklyn, who came up here because they wanted to paint the arches, some of the things on the shoreline. And people don't realize how it's so unique. This in terms of not just the geography, but also, as a subject, if I could figure out a way to do it, just like from my view from my apartment on Indian Road of the park, there are 4 different major forms of transit that come through there. There's, the Metro, I can see Metro North, I can see the West Side Highway, or the
Hudson,
Henry Hudson Highway. There's the waterway, the boat channel, and then there's like pedestrians, and I can see buses go over the bridge. I mean, but it is like it's a nexus for a lot of different forms of moving. So I just think I find it a fascinating spot to be. And a lot of times during this pause we're in, I've gone over to I carry my backpack with all colored pencils and the gouache and the watercolor and the paper and everything with me all the time. And often I'll just go over to the park and I'll just sit there and I'll stare at the water. And I've been watching all the different birds coming in. I saw, the first Canadian geese landed. There's some nesting of Muscoda marsh. There's a little bird at babies that were born a few days ago. There's just all kinds of life. It's unique in New York City to get that close, to be able to get close to nature.
Which is also part of the natural landscape, right? The animals themselves become part of that natural landscape.
Right, but it's reclaimed. Mm-hmm. It's not, it's not native. It's not, it is, the other thing is when I walk up in the hills in Inwood Hill Park, I often, I have an interest in botany because I used to teach at the New York Botanical Garden in their illustrating program. And although I didn't know as much about botany then when I started, because I was a medical illustrator, I've since learned a lot about all kinds of plant identification. And I was up there with Sally, who's supposed to know so much because, she's a friend of Inwood Hill Park. She didn't know that half those plants up there are invasives because they were the remnants of old gardens. There are all these crabapple trees. That was somebody's backyard, the forsythia stuff. They're there because they're survivors from 100 years ago.
It's pretty amazing, that fact that we're part of this chain, right? How we can still keep referencing to that chain and how it keeps appearing to us, right?
Well, I could be completely wrong here. And I'm
sure someone will tell you if you are.
And I'm sure that the Parks Department will tell me too. But the idea that you would go in to a landscape that, had been developed in different ways several times just in the past 150 years, and then say, well, these are invasive species, so we have to rip them out because they're not native. You have to rip out half the park. Most of the trees up there were planted. They're left over from, palatial homes. Anyway, so they're my 2 cents.
Well, and I think what we're hearing over and over again as we kind of skip around in the neighborhood and how wonderfully focused you are in this community and the literally topography of it, whether it's architecture or it's natural resources, is that you're very much a historian, whether you know it or not, in your work. You're capturing things, not intentionally, I'm saying, but the 35 years you've been here, and of course you'd have many residencies upstate and out of state and national, international, but you can't deny this. You have expressed such a strong connection to our natural world in which we are participants in. And I think why your work is so strong in so many ways is that you have this personal connection to the neighborhood and to the materials, to the natural world. And I think that's something really special that you share that comes through your work. At least I've noticed that in your work. And I feel that whether you like it or not, your work becomes a historical record, obviously, through your personal experience. But it'd be really neat to see at the New York Botanical Gardens sometime when there's a show, and perhaps it is a show about the 5 boroughs of Manhattan, and maybe Inwood gets to be presented. And I can very much see some of your work there.
I've already had a solo show at the New York
Well,
Botanical Gardens,
fancy you.
But years ago. But it is, and they have an annual plein air event there, like the Paint Inwood that I start. But of course, it's she. It's an invitational, and but this is my home, Aaron. That's what That's why I'm looking at it. It's what happens to be in front of me. Well, and I like being here. I could live anywhere, just about. 57th and Park, probably not. But, this is, it's intentional that I've stayed here. And I don't have any intention of living anywhere else or wanting to.
So describe the path to Inwood. You were a medical illustration, you've done plein air, you've taught. What was the path to Inwood for you?
The path to Inwood. I would say, you'd like to, what's the best way to put it? My approach to life is really intuitive. So if something I perceive as an opportunity, I'll usually investigate it. But I don't sit down and plan it. I never planned to move to New York. It was an accident. And I never planned to move to Inwood. I never planned, when I was engaged to be married, my husband was finishing medical school and about to do a residency. And I said, let's make a deal. Because we were living in Texas at the time. And I said, let's make a deal. I'll get married if you'll do your residency anywhere north and east of Baltimore. So this is so that because my family was outside Philadelphia, my grandmother was getting old. I'd been away for 5 or 6 years, and I wanted to, it was really in his field the best education was here anyway. So where he picked New York Hospital, so we ended up here, but it wasn't my idea. But New York is the center of the art world, so I'm and I was a medical illustrator, so I freelanced as easy to, not the easiest job to find work. You don't have a lot of flexibility. There are only a few hundred medical illustrators in the whole country. So New York is one place where we did. So and then I opened up the New York Times one day and the education section, and it said assistant professor medical illustration, and I applied for a job. I mean, but it was as random as I opened the Sunday paper, and I thought, oh, I always wanted to teach, and I applied for this, you know, and then it just that it, but it's like like living in a pinball machine. I just sort of bounced right downhill, or uphill anyway. Ended up in Inwood the same way. We were living in Hell's Kitchen. My husband was finishing his fellowship. We had a large dog and a small baby, and we were living in a roach-infested, residence that we were required to leave anyway. And I had no idea where we were going to go. And I had a friend from college who had just bought a co-op on Seaman Avenue. I said, Anna, what am I going to do? She said, I was talking to someone in the playground, and there's a bright, beautiful apartment on 215th Street and Indian Road. And why don't you come up and look up here? And, basically, we moved into the building I'm living in now. But it all just totally random.
You followed the signs.
I guess, but I wanted to live next to a park, to walk the dog, and I grew up in the country, acres of concrete is really hard for me. So anyway, here we are along, so much later.
Yeah. And how does your medical illustration world inform your plein air? Does the former shape the latter? Looking for a correlation here, if any. Wheels are turning hard.
Well, it's they're completely different. It's medical illustration is fascinating, and it requires more than passing complete understanding of anatomy. I've done in my training I dissected 2 cadavers, and and I took a half a dozen courses in the medical school, pathology and anatomy and histology, and the things that I had to be able to not make mistakes. The most important thing is that you don't, your work is a historical record. And so, and their illustrations are used to educate and to communicate information to other people in a nonverbal way. And so the drawings have to be accurate. And it's a life or death accuracy. So you have to make sure that what, it's in the end, at the end, I'm not responsible for, approving it. It's always a collaboration with people, either research scientists or medical professionals or nursing. I did patient education work at one point. But it is a matter of communicating. And then some medical illustrations can be pretty splashy. All those pharmaceutical advertisements with the transparent bodies and the blood flowing and stuff. They're designed by medical illustrators. So it's fun and interesting and challenging and very technical. The technology has gotten, I started teaching, 40 years ago, and I would say 30 years ago, I was, my skills were obsolete. So but I did learn a lot of illustration skills. It was all, I went into it because I was, number one, good in science. And number two, I wanted to keep drawing, and I needed a job that would, I wanted to keep drawing and painting. And I wanted a job that would make me have to practice every day. So, it was, pragmatic choice. But I don't regret it.
And now you have this.
Oh yeah, but regular painting, like
right.
Observational painting or plein air painting, is a whole. It's expressive. Medical illustration is not expressive. It's illustration. You're trying to show. You're trying to communicate a specific message that has that's practical. It's different from like general illustration where you might be making a picture about a story or something, but botanical illustration is just another form of scientific illustration. So I started teaching at the botanical garden because they needed somebody they wanted somebody to teach designing for the printer. So like the kinds of things you need to know for printing illustrations. And then, then 2 or 3 years later, they said, we need somebody to do this basic scientific drawing course. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. Then I got to teach a botanical watercolor class, a very, extremely anal, really traditional watercolor technique. Temperamentally, was not a good fit for me, but it's just a subject matter. Anyway, then again, I learned a whole lot about botany, as a result of having to do that. So, life is never, the learning possibilities never end.
Well, there's quite a bit of your work that we didn't get a chance to discuss. Is there a place where listeners can go to find out more about your projects and yourself and what you're working on? Your website, perhaps?
My website also got frozen 1.5 years ago, so I have that's another project. That's
but it's still there.
Between 10 p.m. and midnight. Actually, it's probably going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up, but right now I'm trying to still work with iWeb. At any rate, yes, you can find the most information about me and links to everything on my website. There's all there, and it is my name, Elissa Gore, ELISSAGORE.net.
Well, thank you so much, Elissa. Listeners will have those links.
Thank you so much for listening to me babble on. It's fun. I've
Babylon
been alone too much.
Babylon should be our new name of our program. I think that'd be great.
That would be great.
You're our first guest. Here we are. So listeners, thank you for listening to Babylon at Inwood Artworks. No, seriously though, we will have those links up for Elissa's website, where you can find her, and then maybe you'll find another website in a few moments after she figures out how to do that one. So thank you so much, Elissa, for joining us here on Artist Spotlight edition of Inwood Artworks On Air, where we showcase the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and visual artists of all stripes that make their home here in Upper Manhattan. Be sure to follow us at Inwood Artworks and InwoodArtworks.NYC on the web and keep up with all we do, including the Inwood Film Festival, Filmmakers Al Fresco, our pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. And stay tuned for more editions of Artist Spotlight. Thanks again to the fine folks here at Amore Cafe and Juice Bar for hosting us. Please support your small businesses here in the neighborhood. For Inwood Artworks On Air, this is Aaron Sims. Thanks for listening to this Artist Spotlight edition of Inwood Artworks On Air. If you have a moment, please show some love right now for this podcast and for the musicians, artists, filmmakers, and writers of Inwood by reviewing Inwood Artworks On Air on Apple Podcasts. It really helps, and we appreciate it, so thanks. Be sure to also check out our Live and Local series, where we tell the stories of Inwood's musical artists and their creators. In the meantime, stay tuned for more Artist Spotlight programs released monthly from Inwood Artworks.